The next speaker is Jonathan Hoenig, is the editor and publisher of the book, a new textbook of Americanism that features never before released discussions with Ayn Rand, as well as present-day essays. He is an analyst for Fox Business Network, and he often appears in American media to discuss social and economic topics. Mr. Hoenig is honoring us with his visit to promote the Hebrew translation of his book. We are very proud to welcome him to launch his book for the very first time in front of an Israeli audience. Mr. Hoenig.
Thank you so much. Shalom, shalom. Happy to be here with you at all. Let's make sure that, awesome. The last Hebrew I spoke, actually, I was about 13 years old in the United States. You can guess where I was. So you'll indulge me by allowing me to speak in English today, but I'm just so honored and delighted to be here. Do we have any capitalists in the audience? All right. Anyone, and I brought some goodies. Do we have anyone ever been to America? As long as we're talking about America. Shout out, where have you been? New York, where else? Arizona, Washington, Chicago. Well, I'll just toss some of those out to those who, in America these days, it's difficult because when you say you're an American capitalist these days, it's almost like a bad word. And it's almost like, oftentimes, it's almost like you have a target on your back. It's really the thing, but not here. So we'll have a few of those more as we go along. Thank you all for having me. I'm here to talk about America, Americanism, in fact, in particular. What is it? We've talked a lot about the West today, America, what America's like versus Israel. So what really is Americanism? What is it? What is the country about? Even more importantly, more specifically, what are the principles on which America was founded? And why I believe all other countries, specifically Israel, should adopt Americanism. America these days, frankly, needs to adopt a little bit of Americanism, but why it's so important to adopt these ideas and integrate them into your own politics here in Israel. I'm going to tell you briefly a bit about me, and I appreciate the introduction. I'm not a scholar or a writer or an academic. I've actually been a professional investor for almost 20 years now. I started on the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade. I was one of those screaming and yelling traders. And trade has really been my life. I mean, how I even got interested in Ayn Rand was because of trade. I was always fascinated by trade. And it really, for me, starts back on the schoolyard. I mean, from the time I think even we're kids, in school, anywhere, you can see the difference. You don't maybe know anything about philosophy or anything about politics, but every kid gets it, can get the idea that there's two ways basically you deal with others. There's force, right? There was the school bullies who, took your lunch money or whatnot, and then there was the kids that you traded with, the kids that I would later learn you acted rationally with. You acted with them through reason, but those are the basic two ways that even as a young person, I understood that you deal with other people. Ayn Rand, now she of course didn't have The Simpsons to illustrate it, but she identified it. She said that the trader and the warrior, those two ends of the spectrum have been antagonists throughout history. The two ways of dealing with people through force and trade. And in fact, her heir and her protege, Leonard Peikoff, said it, I think, perhaps even better. He said, there's only two fundamental ways of dealing with other people, by reason or by force, by intellectual persuasion or by physical coercion, by directing to the opponent's brain an argument, right? You can convince them, or a bullet. And even taxes, we might not think of something like taxes as a bullet, but taxes as a form of force. Taxes is coercion. It's not like the government asks you for that tax money. They come and they literally take it for you. So the two ways of dealing with people, trade and force. And trade is fun. Anyone who's ever engaged in it, because trade is really ultimately about getting what you want. Trade is about satisfying your own selfish needs, not at other people's expense, but to their benefit, right? Trade is always win-win. And this kind of dumbfounded me, especially as a young person, understanding that trade is about, yes, getting what you want, but doing it in a mutually beneficial fashion, all about win-win relationships. The symbol of all relationships among rational men is the trader. said Ayn Rand. Great quote. Now, I'm also a Fox News analyst, as has been said, so you might have seen me either on Fox Business or on the internet somewhere. I've been doing it for quite some time, many little panels talking about these issues, but always promoting capitalism. And you'd be surprised, I think, there are fewer and fewer voices for capitalism, even in the United States now. Even in speaking with so many of you here today throughout the conference, I'm almost more enthusiastic about the freedom movement, the capitalism movement in Israel, from what I can tell, than what in the United States now. Because in the States, as I said, capitalism has almost become a dirty word. I'm also, most proudly, the editor of a new textbook of Americanism, now, thanks to Boaz, available in Hebrew. I hope you will all definitely check out. Thank you. And I can't say how extraordinarily delighted I am to be here. My God, what a neighborhood you guys live in. This is almost, I don't think I'm mincing words. How do you say cesspool in Hebrew? How does that translate? Because, my God, you live in a cesspool of collectivism as you look around the Middle East now. Just some of it was alluded to by some of the other speakers, some of the most ugly, brutal, backward dictatorships. And it is really true. All the what they say about Israel is true. This is really an island, an oasis of freedom. Israel represents reason, individualism, capitalism, civilization here in this complete cesspool. I mean, just look at everything. You've seen stat after stat, but everything from the patents, which I consider pretty valuable. Patents are that intellectual knowledge that really transforms our lives. Look what comes out of Israel throughout, as compared to the rest of the Middle East. Israel protects individual rights, including property rights. And of course, that's what's made it so successful. And as has been talked about here at the conference today, the more free Israel has become, the more prosperous it has become for all. Look what happens to Tim Cook in Israel. Tim Cook, of course, the CEO of Apple, largest company, most successful company, certainly in my lifetime. In Israel, he comes and he's Now, Tim Cook happens to be gay. We know this. So in Israel, he opens up the research center, right? He meets with elected officials. He produces. So how did that? Now, this happens next door to you people here. This isn't thousands of miles away. Look how much ideas matter. Look what happens to people like Tim Cook because of something as insignificant as who they determine to love right next door to where we are right now. Ayn Rand was asked about Israel in 1979, and she said, "You must support Israel. Israel is the advanced, technologically civilized country amidst a group of almost totally primitive savages who have not changed for years and who are racist and who resent Israel because it's bringing industry, intelligence, and modern technology into their stagnation." That was 1979, and I think that's still the case today. I don't see tremendous values being created anywhere else in the Middle East except a free, democratic, but real capitalist and individualist Israel. So, Ayn Rand saw it, 30-some years ago, and it's still true to this case. And you see it both in the abstract and something very meaningful and tactile to all of us, like life expectancy. I mean, when Rand made that observation of Israel's impact on technology and advancement, Israel was already leading in terms of life expectancy, and that edge, even over the United States, has continued to grow, and certainly over your neighbors in the Middle East. So what's next? You have this tremendous enthusiasm now brewing with the Israeli freedom movement. It has been started decades and built on by many, many generations. So what's next for America, Americanism, and Israel and the freedom movement? Well, I don't often quote Kanye, but this time he got it right. He said it's all about ideas. Ideas are what make a country valuable. Ideas are what make a currency valuable. Ideas are what create wealth. It's not as if the water is fundamentally different in Israel versus anywhere else in the Middle East. It is the ideas that make this country so powerful and so special. Ideas are what move the world. And I think you need, and God knows we need in America, more Americanism, real Americanism, not sacrifice for your neighbor, not love thy country, greater good, but real Americanism. Americanism is, people say, it's American as apple pie, means nothing. Burgers and hamburgers means nothing. You know, is Americanism about kneeling? You know, we spent a whole 6 months in America debating about if you're a real American, you kneel to the flag. Insignificant BS. What about saluting? Are you a bad American if you don't salute? What about if you don't salute dictatorships? Is it buy American and hire American? Is that what makes you a good American, or buy Israeli? Or is it I am my brother's keeper? Well, they're both wrong. What really America is about, what Americans' secret sauce is individualism. That is the foundational principle on which America was based, is founded, and is great. That's the secret sauce, as I like to say. Yes, I think it deserves a round of applause. That's the fundamental. America was created on this one idea that the individual has rights, not God. It's not all about the man upstairs. It's not all about the queen. It's, the tribe, the greater good. It wasn't majority rule under America, although you often hear even Americans talk about the value of being a democracy. They're wrong. I mean, America is a constitutional republic, and for good reason. America isn't about majority rule, and certainly not country first, which ironically was the 2008 Republican nominee John McCain's slogan, was country first, a very collectivist. He lost, thankfully, but not surprisingly. That's not what America's about. In America, it's the individual. The individual is the standard of value in every context. And that was and is an unbelievable revolution in politics. To this day, it has not been, to my knowledge, replicated anywhere. A tremendous moral, political revolution, and I think what has made America the most successful and prosperous country in the history of mankind. Now let's kind of take a quick time out, because rights is a tricky wicket, as they say. We hear that term quite a bit now. I have a right to this and a right to that. What do and another gentleman earlier today was talking about positive and negative rights. When I talk about rights, and I believe when Ayn Rand would talk about rights, she's not talking about the right to health care or the right to a job. She's talking about the right to act. A right, when properly understood, is the right to an action, independent action. It's not something you get for free from someone else. You do not have a right. How can you have a right to a value that is produced by someone else to your own benefit? So it's the right to act, to get something, not get something for free. And speech is an obvious example. I don't know if you know either of these airheads, blowhards here in Israel. That's Milos Yiannopoulos and Alex Jones. They can say whatever they want in America. Thankfully, I don't have to listen to them, and no programmer has to put them on. And in fact, a lot of online services have banned these particular characters from their services, and that's perfectly congruent with the right to speak. You have the right to speak, but not the obligation that someone carries your message. Same thing with healthcare. I know this might be a little more controversial here, but I believe properly understood, you have the right to pay for healthcare, but not the right to demand that others provide it to you. So when we talk about a free society, we're talking about free from force, free from coercion. Americanism is that. Americanism is the place that just takes force out from society. Both force used against you by criminals, right? People who would shake you down. Well, those are obvious force, but also, and I think even more importantly, force from government itself. That is the antithesis of proper Americanism. It's not free healthcare, free housing. It's not conscription into the military, or lately, and we see this in America, trade protectionisms. This notion that if you're a steel worker, for some reason you should be, or a farmer, for some reason in America these days, you seem to be guaranteed a particular job. That is, again, a real antithesis of that rugged individualism that is the fundamental of the country. When we talk about a free society, we mean it. And of course, the more free a society, the more prosperous. And free to think. Dr. Brooke, Yaron Brooke, always makes the point that, our tool to living, our basic tool to living is not our muscles, but it's our mind. So it's that freedom to think, to act on our actions. That's what America is. Each man is free to pursue his own values. You're not anyone's master or anyone's slave. And what a revolution that was, and to this day is across most of the world. Ayn Rand has a great quote. And when they passed actually the smoking ban in Chicago, they banned smoking. Boy, it's about 15 years ago now. I had these matches sent up and printed up and sent them to all the local politicians in hopes that they might think about individual rights, the right of a bar owner to allow they passed it anyway, but the smallest minority on earth is the individual. If you're for minorities, you're only for the individual. Americanism comes down to, in my sense, this. If you had to say, well, give it to me in a nutshell, what's the gist? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You've heard it before. It's from the Declaration of Independence. And even in the States now, when I say it's become an advertising slogan, I'm not kidding you. It actually was an advertising slogan for Cadillac cars about a decade ago. Life, liberty, and the pursuit. And I was aghast by that. I mean, those are pretty holy words. I'm not a religious man, but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that means something. That's not an advertising slogan. Liberty, life, you have a right to your own life, to do what you believe in is necessary to pursue your own values. Liberty, your own liberty, to think what you want and to act to achieve those values. Property, to earn money and then to keep the product of your labor. And of course, to the pursuit of happiness, to live for yourself, to choose what constitutes your happiness. This is truly revolutionary stuff. It's not an advertising slogan or tagline. And it is your happiness. There's a selfishness, and I say that in the best sense possible because it is a properly understood, a very wonderful word that America is about pursuing your happiness, not giving it up for the environment, for the greater good, sacrificing for this one or that one. It's about pursuing your life. My God, we only get how many years if we're lucky? I know, thanks to Israeli technology, it's growing all the time, I know, but if we get 80, 90, God willing, years on this earth, it's about pursuing your happiness. And to be achieved, it can't be handed to you. You have to determine. It's difficult on some level. You have to determine, I gotta have this life, I have this opportunity. What are my values and how can I achieve them? That is the rugged individualism that truly makes America great. That selfish pursuit of your own values. You're not a sacrifice for the greater good. It's that self-interest that really defines America and makes it unique because, what is conventional morality? I don't know in Israel. I'm not going to be so bold as to speak about it, but let's just take a look at Venezuela, for example. Venezuela is all about sacrifice. Any socialist country, to the extent that socialist, to the extent that sacrifices is prioritized. Sacrifice is good. Individualism, Americanism says, I'm no one's sacrifice. I am a man. I have the same rights as every other man and am to be treated as such. I will not run anyone's life or let anyone else run mine. I will not rule or be ruled. I will not be a master nor a slave. I will not sacrifice myself to anyone, nor sacrifice anyone to myself. Again, Iran. Now, what about does it work? Because if this was just theoretical, if this didn't work, we'd have a problem. But of course, we know it does work. It works very, very well. Americanism changed it all. America heralded this new aristocracy. Before America, it was all basically about what tribe you were from, whether you were born on, in the States, we'd call it the right side of the tracks, but, literally, were you the king? Were you from the aristocracy, the caste system? Americanism heralded this natural aristocracy of ability. It wasn't about old world social barriers in America under proper Americanism. It's about your ideas, where you're going. So again, this is what ruled man for hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years, the caste system. America tore that all down properly and said, and even, here, I know Israel isn't tribal, but this whole notion of, I have friends at home who say, well, I'm a Kohanim. And I was just like, Kohanim, what even is that? This tribal idea is just wrong from America. This racist idea that you're defined by how much blood is in this percent from sub-Saharan Africa and this percent from Scandinavia. Americanism says goodbye to all that. It says it's about your ideas. That's what's important, not something as insignificant as, your last name, your sex, or the color of your skin. The American frontier was the place where any man or woman could escape that burden of living for others, living for the king, and make himself. America, I think, is probably oftentimes best represented by that self-made man, to be who he or she wants to be, only in this country. And that's a wonderful, beautiful passage from the new book. I'll give you a few examples, and maybe you know these. Who is this? He was born on a farm in 1863, certainly not born into a wealthy family, a well-to-do family. He was an engineer for Thomas Edison, and he was working as an apprentice at age 16. Does anyone recognize who this is? That is Henry Ford. Exactly, Henry Ford, who changed and transformed transportation completely with his inventions and his innovation in combustion motors. What about this one, this woman? She was an immigrant. Now, we're all against immigrants here in the United States now, unfortunately, but she was an immigrant. She emigrated to the U.S. in 1893, not from any well-to-do family, but she was fascinated by skincare. So she worked in a lab, and she got together $1,000, and anyone could recognize this? She was the first woman to use the founder's name and the name of her product. Is that? Elizabeth Arden, who has really revolutionized beauty. You know, in America before Elizabeth Arden, basically beauty products, makeup was associated with prostitutes. I'm not saying you're a prostitute. I'm just saying it. And she changed that all around. Now, and of course, Elizabeth Arden now is something that we all know. There was this woman, Elizabeth Arden. Now, let's just think quickly, getting back to what we said about ideas moving the world. Let's say she went to Saudi Arabia. Elizabeth Arden, she didn't immigrate to the U.S. She went to Saudi Arabia. I mean, never been there, don't want to go there. I don't know what kind of beauty situation they have there. I feel terrible for these women who live in these countries. I don't know how successful Elizabeth Arden would have been with a government-sponsored app tracking her every move, or brutal slings. I don't know, maybe she wouldn't have gone to skincare. Saudi Arabia has a record number of executions this year, so I guess, they are, in fact, looking for new executioners. So maybe she could have had an alternate, we wouldn't have had a tremendous entrepreneur, but I mean, I just got to say, I look at this and I throw up. You guys are very close to it in proximity, and it just gives me even more respect for what Israel has built in the face of this really unbelievably brutal context. What about this gentleman? Who is this? He was born in a housing project, certainly not born into great wealth. P. Diddy, that's right. P. Diddy, Sean Combs, who transformed entertainment. I mean, before really Sean Combs understood the value of a brand when it comes to entertainment, he made tremendous money off endorsement deals, not even so much as music, but certainly the publishing as well. A tremendously successful guy. So again, ideas rule the world. So let's say Sean had been born in Lebanon, not too far from here. I don't know, maybe some of you guys have been to Lebanon. Not on my list, not that interested in going. Can't go there. Good. Well, and as I understand it, there's tremendous racism in Lebanon. Black is not beautiful, as much of the press goes. In fact, there's some pretty horrible violence against Africans and against dark-skinned people in Lebanon. So, how successful would someone like P. Diddy have been under the antithesis of Americanism, that ugly tribalism that dominates so much of the world? This guy, I never knew who this was till I prepared for this. This is a hero of mine. He was born here, he served in the military, and this gentleman invented the product that has really saves my life day after day. He invented waves. This is, I believe it's Yuri Levine. Transformed cartography. I mean, I'm old enough to remember having that map, stopping to ask for directions. Did I go too far? Did I go too far? He changed that all. And that is the type of thing that obviously didn't happen in America, but it only can happen under Americanism, individualism, freedom of thought. And I'll put Ayn Rand on that list as well. Ayn Rand is America's philosopher. She immigrated from St. Petersburg, Russia in the early part of the 20th century. She was not even fluent in English when she came to the States, but a century later, she had already sold over 33 million books. So again, ideas rule the world. What if she had never left? What if she had stayed in, this is Ayn Rand, of course, revolutionized philosophy, but what if she had stayed in St. Petersburg? How would Ayn Rand have done? What any free thinker, any individualist had done under Tsarist and then Soviet Russia? I mean, she would have been sent to Siberia. There would have been no Ayn Rand, truly. So ideas rule the world. But when she came to the States, she was actually frustrated when she came to the United States in the 1920s because she saw that same collectivism taking hold in America that in a sense she fled in Europe, in Russia. Her answer was a project called Textbook of Americanism. It was started as a series of Q&As in a pamphlet called The Vigil. And the idea was basically to educate people, specifically the movie-going audience. Ayn Rand was part of a concerned group of very Hollywood bigwigs at the time, people like Clark Gable, Walt Disney, in fact, Greta Garbo, the big screen legends of the time. So they were concerned about communism rising in the United States and commissioned Rand to write a series of questions and answers, basically explaining what is this country all about? People are forgetting its basic ideas. She proposed 41 questions. She answered 12, and the rest have remained unanswered. Wait for it. Until now, because we have now a new textbook of Americanism in Hebrew for the most Western country in the Middle East, the most Western country probably outside of America in the world. We pick up where Rand left off. We answer those unanswered questions, bringing for the first time her unpublished work in her definitive statement on just what America is all about. And she starts her treatise on politics, not with, oh, you have a right to health care or gun control, but with this basic fundamental question. The basic issue in the world today is between individualism and collectivism. Individualism holds that man exists by his own right for his own sake. Collectivism says that man has no rights. It's just up to the whim of the group. And we know many, many examples of throughout history of collectivism, but my God, here, you don't have to look too far. They're all around you. I mean, they literally surround you, these unbelievably racist, tribal, backward cesspools, in my opinion. It's my words. America and Israel is the antithesis. We are the shining hope of freedom, of individual, of liberty, of man's mind. That is us. That's we are. We're the vanguard. And you here are the only ones who are speaking about it, as I understand, really properly. And that is from an individualist perspective, your right to your own life, to pursue your happiness. That's what America is all about. And properly, I believe the good that comes from America, from Israel, comes from that individualist, benevolent, freedom-loving notion. So I personally applaud you for everything each of you are doing in your own worlds to bring these voices of freedom, of individualism, of capitalism to the Middle East. So I will applaud you. And in a very difficult context and very difficult part of the world. So thank you so much for having me. Don't give up. Buy a new textbook of Americanism. You have a textbook now. You needed one for sociology. You needed one for mathematics. So now we have one for politics. It's available in Hebrew. And America is individualism. That's what it's about. It's not country first. It's not sacrifice to the greater good. Neither the right nor the left reflect it now. We can talk about that in Q&A if you want. But I tell you, you don't see a lot of this proper Americanism in America these days. But I think if any country is going to survive, these are the ideas that they'll need to adopt. So thank you. Thanks to Boaz especially. And check out the book. And thank you all so much.